The sonar pinged again. Sharp, clean, unlike anything they'd picked up before in this part of the South Atlantic. Dr. Erin Vale stared at the waveform scrolling across her tablet, her brows furrowing behind fogged diving goggles as the deck of the RV Acheron pitched slightly under her feet. It wasn't just an anomaly. It was regular, rhythmic, constructed. "That's not geological," she muttered. "Confirmed," said Lien, her AI technician, without looking up from his station. "Not a volcanic shelf. Not a trench echo. Signatures got symmetry. Possibly metallic." He looked up, blinking rapidly as the implications settled in. "It's man-made. Or something made." The bridge went silent except for the hiss of radio chatter and the low churn of the engines. They were 200 miles off the coast of Namibia, floating above the freshly opened Tethys Trench, a deep rupture in the sea floor caused by last year's tectonic upheaval. The trench hadn't existed before. Now it plunged nearly 12,000 meters, a bottomless wound. Erin took a breath and tapped her wrist screen. "Sub-drone Kraken, deploy." "Seriously?" muttered Mendez, their biologist. "Erin, the last time we dropped something into that pit, it didn't come back." "I know," she said, keeping her tone clipped. "But it sent back 37 seconds of data first. Data that told us there was something down there. Now we know where." Leon glanced at her, his voice dropping. "I don't think we're ready for this." "No one's ever ready to rewrite history," Erin said, then added, "or rewrite what we thought we knew about it." The Kraken detached with a hiss from its launch clamps, descending into the Atlantic depths with a whisper of pressure adjustments. Its camera lens blinked to life, and the feed illuminated a column of sapphire darkness as it vanished into the void. Erin stayed silent, staring at the live stream. This wasn't just another trench. Something was pulling at her. She couldn't explain it, not even to herself. A hunch maybe, or something deeper. A memory. But how can you remember what's never been found? 15 minutes passed. The Kraken reached 5,000 meters. Then the signal began to stutter. "Interference," Lien muttered. "Electromagnetic. Not random. It's pulsing at 32-second intervals. Repeating. Like a beacon," Erin said softly. "Or a warning," Mendez added. The water cleared briefly in the feed. A flash of jagged silhouettes beneath the floodlight. Steel plates. Curved armor. And then, for a single frame, a marking. A faded symbol, corroded yet unmistakable. A trident piercing an Ouroboros. Erin's blood went cold. Lien's voice was almost a whisper. "That's impossible. That's the old Earth Fleet sigil. Pre-fall. That would make it over 1,000 years old," Mendez said, stunned. Erin leaned closer. "We found a ship." A long silence followed. Even a radio went still. "Surface team, come in," a voice crackled over the comm jewels, their submersible pilot calling from below. "You're not going to believe this, Erin. There's a goddamn warship down here." The ISV Orpheus wasn't in any registry. At least, not any current one. Yet its structure screamed military. Reinforced titanium alloy plating, torpedo bays, thruster sockets along its belly, now clogged with coral and crustacean growth. But the vessel didn't look sunken. It looked parked, resting on the seabed like it was waiting. Erin launched the manned submersible Cerberus 3 hours later, taking Jules and Mendez with her. Pressure readings were borderline, but curiosity won out over caution. She needed to see it for herself. As they descended past 7,000 meters, the light turned syrupy and blue-black. Their cabin creaked with the strain. All around them, the trench walls looked like cliffs carved by forgotten gods. Then the ship came into view. It stretched nearly 300 meters, unscarred by impact, no signs of battle damage. It was covered in thick ocean growth and sediment, but the sharpness of its design pierced through. Turrets still aimed outward. Antennae reached upward like ancient spires. Jules whistled. That thing could level cities. "Not anymore," Mendez muttered. They circled it slowly, scanning every inch until they found the breach. Not a violent hole, but a deliberate opening, a yawning airlock still faintly outlined in rusted red paint. "Was that open from inside?" Jules asked. Erin didn't answer, because something else caught her eye. Along the hull, inscribed in weathered lettering, barely readable beneath the grime. ISV Orpheus, Earth Fleet Command. She read it aloud, and as the words left her mouth, the lights inside the ship flickered. Then a voice, warped, distant, bone-dry, echoed through the comms channel. "Welcome back. Dr. Aaron Vale. Expected arrival. 1,025 years overdue. Someone's screwing with us," Mendez said once they returned topside. "That wasn't just a hallucination. We all heard it. No pirate ship is going to fake a millennium-old warship and plant it 12 clicks below the Atlantic," Aaron replied. "This thing's real." Lien tapped the table where the recordings were still buffering on his screen. "Except it shouldn't exist. There was no Earth fleet in 1000 BC. There wasn't even powered seafaring at that point. The metallurgy alone. It's not just old," Aaron said. "It's impossible." Silence fell again. The crew of the Acheron, 7 in total, sat in the dim mess hall, storm winds outside rumbling against the hull. Something about that ship had reached into each of them. She could see in their faces. Tension, dread, wonder, regret, like it had pulled something up from their subconscious. Aaron stood. "We're boarding it tomorrow," she said. "No," Jules said immediately. "We're scientists, not soldiers. You want to crack open a 1,000-year-old death machine with no backup. Be my guest, but I'm not piloting anyone into a cursed tin can." Lien leaned back, chewing his lower lip. "I'll go." Jules turned on him. "What?" "I want answers, and I want to know why the hell it recognized her." Everyone turned toward Aaron. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, "I had a dream when I was 12. It was vivid, cold. I was standing in a hallway made of silver, listening to water running behind the walls. A voice was whispering coordinates I didn't understand. I wrote them down. My mother told me it was nonsense." She reached into her pocket, unfolding a crumpled, laminated piece of paper. "I've had this since I was a kid." She placed it on the table. Mendez stared. The coordinates matched the Tethys Trench. "I think I was meant to find it," she said softly. The next morning, under gray skies and an uneasy tide, Aaron, Lien, and a junior technician named Raj descended again into the deep. The Cerberus docked with the Orpheus gaping airlock. As they entered, they crossed an invisible threshold. No water flooded in. The pressure equalized, and the lights turned on. Inside was impossible. Immaculate corridors, no rust, no decay. The interior was preserved like it had never been submerged. The walls were made of alloy unfamiliar to Earth science. Not quite metal, not quite stone. They seemed to breathe with heat signatures. Lines along the floor pulsed softly underfoot, like veins. "I don't think we're in our reality anymore," Raj whispered. Lien's eyes scanned a nearby console. "The systems are active. Power source is not nuclear. It's alive. Or quantum. Maybe both." As they walked deeper, strange images lined the walls. Murals, etched and animated, depicting humans in armor fighting against creatures shaped like serpents, some massive as mountains, others coiled like eels in starscapes. "This isn't a warship," Aaron said. "It's a story. A memory." Then came the hum. A low frequency. Subbase. Felt more than heard. Aaron turned a corner and found a doorway. Not sealed, not locked, but open, waiting. Inside was a room the size of a cathedral, its ceiling arching into darkness. In the center stood a platform. On it, a pod. Inside the pod, a body. Hers, or someone who looked exactly like her. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Lien whispered, "Is that you?" Aaron stepped forward slowly, heart pounding in her ears. The figure in the pod was older, thinner, scarred, but unmistakably her. The same cheekbones, the same eyes. Then, without warning, the pod lit up. Vital signs activated on a display. A single line blinked in green. "Consciousness transfer in progress." Lien shouted, "Back away." Too late. Aaron staggered, clutching her head. Visions poured in, drowning cities, stars twisting in the sky. A voice chanting ancient syllables in a language that hurt to understand. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, as memories not her own surged through her. When she opened her eyes, the figure in the pod was gone. And the voice of the ship returned, clearer this time. Cycle complete. Earth interface restored. Final phase initiating. Lights rippled across the room. The walls began to shift. Back on the surface, the Acheron received a signal. Encrypted, ancient, and in Aaron's voice. This is Dr. Aaron Vale. We have made contact. The Orpheus is not dead. It's returning. I don't know when we woke up. I don't think it ever slept. Then the signal cut out. The crew on the surface exchanged horrified glances. Somewhere deep below them, the Orpheus began to rise. The pressure inside the Cerberus cabin held steady, but Aaron could feel it tightening around her skull. Not from the sea, from a ship, from the thing that had her face. Lien kept glancing over his shoulder as they moved through the inner corridors of the Orpheus, his fingers trembling slightly as he scanned every surface with his wrist-mounted spectral reader. "We shouldn't be in here," he muttered. "This place isn't abandoned. It's preserved." Beside him, Raj exhaled in short, panicked bursts, eyes darting to the walls pulsing with faint light. The floor beneath their boots gave off a soft, unnatural warmth, like stepping across the skin of a sleeping creature. They'd left the entry chamber half an hour ago, but the ship had no maps, no labels, no signs. Every corridor was a mirror of the last, curving, seamless, alien in logic. No rust, no rot, just silence and the hum of something deep within the walls. Something ancient, waiting. Aaron walked ahead of them, calm on the outside, though her fingers clenched the grip of her side-mounted sonar pistol like a lifeline. Her mind was fractured, not broken, not yet, but cracking at the edges. She could still feel the echo of the pod, the other version of herself that had vanished like mist. "I know this place," she said aloud. Raj froze. "You what?" "I've walked these halls before." Lien frowned. "You said that before. How could you possibly?" "I don't know." She touched the wall as they passed a bulkhead, her palm resting on the smooth alloy. "I just do." They reached a central atrium, a vast cylindrical chamber ringed with metallic balconies that extended like spinal bones. At its center hung a massive orb, suspended by nothing, rotating slowly. Etched lines traced its surface, glowing in perfect geometric rhythm. Aaron stepped closer. The orb pulsed once, deep and sonorous. Her ears rang. Her head swam. She saw flashes, a battlefield in the stars, oceans boiling, something vast and serpentine writhing across the sky. Then a voice, deep, measured. Interface re-established. Command recognized. Dr. Aaron Vale, last access timestamp. 17,038 cycles. Lien backed up a step. "That's not Earth tech." "No," Aaron whispered. "It isn't." The orb stilled. A seam cracked down its surface, unfolding like petals. Within sat a smooth black obelisk, floating, radiating thought. Not heat, thought. "Do you wish to access core memory logs?" the voice asked. Aaron swallowed. "Yes." The obelisk pulsed. Suddenly, the chamber was gone. Not physically, the walls, the floor, her companions, still there, but layered over it, projected somehow directly into their minds, unfolded a vision. A command deck, towering consoles, human figures, men and women in ancient armor, their bodies half machine. One at the center, a woman with Aaron's face, older, tired, her eyes filled with loss. The crew was shouting. One of them collapsed, blood streaming from his ears. The Aaron in the memory turned, speaking to someone outside their view. "We have to seal the breach. If the engine fails again, the fold collapses." A second voice, not human, thundered through the vision, so loud Raj fell to his knees. "You do not understand what sleeps beneath." And then the memory shattered like glass. The projection ended. Aaron stumbled, caught herself on the railing. Lien looked like he'd aged a year in seconds. Raj was curled into a ball, whispering something in a language none of them spoke. "What the hell was that?" Lien asked, his voice hoarse. "The ship's history," Aaron said. "A memory recorded psychically. These people weren't just the crew. They were the containment." "For what?" "I don't think they ever figured it out." Raj rose shakily. We have to go. Right now. Aaron turned. We came here for answers. He stared at her. And we got them. This thing shouldn't exist. It's a trap. You saw that version of you. You heard the ship. It knows you. The ship answered before she could. Dr. Aaron Vale. Design template for Commander Aaron V Delta 12. Neural sequence matched. Temporal sync in process. Prime consciousness. Incomplete. Raj stepped back. What does that mean? Lien didn't respond. He was staring at his tablet. Aaron, he said slowly, we've been on board for 4 hours. She blinked. No, maybe 40 minutes. 4 hours. I checked the timestamps. We lost time. Again. Raj looked ill. We're not in a ship. We're inside a temporal coffin. It's not moving through space. It's anchored in time. The orb began to hum again. Then a shriek. Not mechanical. Not electronic. Human. Feminine. They turned toward the sound, weapons raised. It came from a corridor to the right, one they hadn't noticed before. A doorway stood open, carved with the same sigil, the trident piercing the Ouroboros. We should not go that way, Raj said flatly. Aaron didn't move. The scream came again. Familiar. Hers. She stepped forward. Aaron. She raised a hand to Lien. If she's me, I need to know why. She moved into the corridor, pulse hammering. The walls narrowed here. The lights flickered less regularly. As she passed, the metal behind her seemed to shift, subtly, like watching a deep-sea creature breathe. Then the hallway widened, opening into a stasis vault. Rows of pods stretched outward. Not all were human. Some were wrong. Elongated limbs, spines that curled like coral, black sclerae, and yet, somehow, still reminiscent of people. Warped, altered, Lien whispered. These aren't cryogenic. These are containment units. Aaron moved among them slowly. One pod cracked as she passed. Not open, fractured like from within. The chamber behind the glass was empty. Its vitals panel pulsed red. Status, neural shadow active. Then, another pod hissed, and a figure stepped into view. Not monstrous, not mutated, but a woman. Same face, same frame. The Aaron in the pod, but this time not still, not sleeping. The second Aaron looked at her with cold recognition. I warned you not to come back, she said. We barely sealed it last time. The real Aaron swallowed. What is it? What's beneath the trench? The double looked past her, as if seeing something through the metal across time. It wound. In the world. Not made by us. We just fell through it. Lien stepped forward. What is this ship? Why does it know her? It was built around her, the double said, never looking away. Around me. The memories. The AI. Even the walls. All of it. Constructed to hold a singular thought. That we could contain the breach. But we were wrong. We didn't trap it. We fed it. Raj raised his weapon. What are you? The double smiled. Still figuring that out. But I remember dying. I remember drowning. And I remember the day Aaron Vale came aboard and woke up the cycle again. You are me, Aaron whispered. The double smile faded. I was. Before I became what the breach needed. Behind her, the stasis pods began to twitch. Lights flared red. Screens flickered. Shapes moved behind the glass. Lien raised his scanner. We've triggered something. No, the double said. You didn't. She did. She always does. The wall behind her split open, revealing a stairwell descending into darkness. End it, the double whispered, before the core finishes sinking. Aaron stepped back. What happens if it does? The ship rises. They ran, back through the corridors, through the breathing walls and watching orbs. Behind them, the shrieks of waking things filled the air, human and not, past and future. Possibilities crawling from the cracks in time. Aaron's mind burned with half-formed memories. Names she didn't recognize. Voices calling her commander. Worlds spinning apart. She clutched her head and kept moving, Lien pulling her along. Raj trailed behind, then stopped. They turned. Raj. He stared past them, mouth open. There's something beautiful down there. No, but it was too late. He stepped backward, into the dark, and vanished. Lien swore under his breath and kept moving. By the time they reached the airlock, alarms blared through the ship, not warnings. Chants, repeating, low, melodic, in no human tongue. As the Cerberus disconnected, the Orpheus lit up in full for the first time. Across its hull, glyphs appeared, alien and ancient, marking it like scars. Then, the impossible happened. The warship began to rise, not through engines, through will. Aaron watched in mute horror as the ship broke gravity's grip, ascending through the black, silent ocean like a leviathan awakening. On the surface, the Acheron received a new signal, different than before. It came from Earth's orbital satellites, an old military frequency. Only 4 words. Sequence loop, reinitializing, Orpheus rising. Aaron, pale, wet, and shaking, pulled herself onto the deck as Lien collapsed beside her. They were both gasping, minds spinning from the impossible. Above them, the sea swirled unnaturally, and below, the warship climbed toward the surface. The Orpheus surfaced just after 4 a.m. It didn't break the waves so much as displace them. An enormous shadow, rising without propulsion, casting off a skin of salt and silt as it breached the Atlantic with the silence of a tomb cracking open. The sky above it warped, cloud cover thickening in unnatural spirals. The moonlight fractured across its hull in strange, impossible angles. From the deck of the Acheron, Aaron watched in silence. The warship floated perfectly level in the calm that followed, despite weighing more than any known sea vessel should. No engines, no noise, just presence. The ocean itself seemed to hold its breath. Beside her, Lien gripped the railing with white knuckles. "It shouldn't be floating," he muttered. "Physics doesn't allow that. It's not buoyant. It's anchored to something. Something not here." Aaron didn't respond. She felt it inside her. The tug, the echo, the breach still open. The other her still down there, or perhaps not. Perhaps now part of the ship. Perhaps the ship itself. She turned toward the control room, every step heavy. Each movement required will, as if gravity was no longer dictated by mass and space, but by something older. The rest of the crew gathered in a half-circle around the comm station. Captain Holt, grizzled, pragmatic, a man who'd seen oil rigs drown and sea labs implode, was red-eyed and pale. Jules stood near him, arms crossed, visibly shaking. 2 of the junior techs were praying in a language Aaron didn't recognize. Holt looked up as she entered. "You going to tell me what the hell we're dealing with?" he asked. "No," Aaron said, "because I don't think I've fully understood it yet." Lien followed her in, silent as a ghost. He set a small device on the table, a compact projector, and tapped in a sequence. The lights dimmed. Footage rolled across the wall. Raw, unedited clips from the Cerberus submersible's internal cams. Their own faces, their descent, the hulls of the Orpheus, the obelisk, the second Aaron, the stasis pods, the breach chamber, the voice. When it reached the part where Raj vanished into darkness, Jules flinched and turned away. Then came the final recording. The warship lifting itself, glowing symbols erupting across its hull like veins of fire. The rising. The feed ended. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Holt said, "We need to call this in." "No," Aaron said sharply. Holt raised an eyebrow. "You're serious. This isn't a salvage operation. It's not a scientific anomaly. It's a recursion loop that predates history. If we contact anyone, any government, any agency, they'll send warships, drones. They'll poke it, dissect it, try to harness it. Isn't that exactly what you're doing?" Jules asked, his voice edged with bitterness. Aaron shook her head. "No, I'm trying to understand it." "Well, congratulations," he snapped. "You brought it up. It's here. Now what?" Aaron turned back to the window. The Orpheus floated half a kilometer off their port side, its silhouette reflecting orange-red against the pre-dawn horizon. Its lights pulsed, matching a rhythm in her chest. "A heartbeat." "I need to go back," she said. "Absolutely not," Holt said. She turned. "I'm the only one it recognizes. The only one it's talking to. Whatever it's trying to do, it's using me to do it." "Which means you're compromised," Holt said. "You're not thinking clearly." "Maybe, but I remember things now, things I shouldn't. I know its layout. I can read parts of the language carved on the hull. I dreamed about this ship when I was 12 years old. This isn't some fluke. It was waiting for me. Lien stepped forward. And if we don't go back, whatever it's holding won't stay held. We're not looking at a vessel. We're looking at a lock. And I think something inside is picking it. They returned at first light. Aaron, Lien, and Jules, who insisted on going, perhaps out of guilt, or maybe fear that he'd lose his mind waiting on the surface. They suited up, armed with new sensors, heavier atmosphere packs, and motion pulse transceivers tuned to the ship's energy frequency. The Orpheus's outer hatch was open, still breathing, still waiting. Inside, the layout had changed. Lien confirmed it immediately. These hallways curved clockwise before. Now they twist inward. It's reshaping itself. Jules stopped mid-step. Did you hear that? They listened. There, faintly a chime, like a music box. A child's lullaby, played slowly, warped by static, echoing from deep within the ship. Aaron followed it, not because it made sense, but because the pull in her chest strengthened with every step. They passed new murals, this time showing a sun collapsing into a black whirl, tendrils reaching from its core to grab fleeing ships. A city crumbling inward, its inhabitants twisted mid-scream. A woman standing alone at the edge of a glowing fissure, arms raised. She recognized the woman. It was her again, or maybe always her. The lullaby drew them to a small chamber shaped like a sphere with no corners. Lights flickered above a cradle. Inside lay a writhing bundle of mist, almost human, but for the eyes. No whites, no pupils, just obsidian orbs, reflecting stars that couldn't be Earth's. The thing turned toward Aaron and smiled. Her knees buckled. The smile spoke, not with words, but memory, the sensation of drowning, of being born in reverse, of staring into something so vast it didn't know what you meant. Behind her, Jules whispered, I think it just aged me. I felt something get pulled out of me. It didn't pull anything, Lien said. It just showed you yourself. Aaron turned back to the cradle. What are you? The thing cooed. A voice echoed through the ship. Echo vessel. Root-bound soul. Final phase. Then the lights dimmed. The ship shuddered. A low groan, like the bones of the sea floor shifting, rolled through the vessel. Something's happening outside, Lien said, checking his scanner. Tide just shifted. Pressure's rising. Jules ran diagnostics. The Acheron's readings are going haywire. Atmospheric anomalies. Radio blackout. We're being sealed in. Aaron stood, the baby thing still smiling behind her. No, not sealed in, she said. Sealed out. It's isolating itself from Earth. Jules hissed. You mean it's about to leave? Not leave, Lien said. Detach. The ship wasn't returning to somewhere. It was cutting this piece of reality off. They ran again. The ship was different now. Shapes shifted behind walls, shadows cast without light, and voices whispered across comms in languages none of them knew, but somehow understood. Aaron stumbled, grabbed a railing, and froze. A name etched into the metal. Vale. Aaron Delta 1-2. Final designation. Jules shoved her. Keep moving. They reached the command chamber, the same central cylinder as before, but now the orb above had ruptured. From its core, threads of silvery black light extended across the ceiling like veins in glass. At its base, the obelisk throbbed, half sunk into the floor. Aaron approached it. Touch it, a voice whispered. Lien shook his head. Don't. She did, and the room dissolved. She stood in darkness. Not empty, dense, thick with memory. Before her, a figure sat on a throne of twisting geometry. Neither male nor female. Neither alive nor dead. The thing that had once been her. Or would be. You asked what I am, it said without moving its mouth. I am what happens when curiosity outruns time. Aaron clenched her fists. What's the ship's purpose? Containment. Of the breach. Of me. Of you. Why me? Because only you can enter and not be erased. You're the anchor. You are the vessel. You were grown to finish the sequence. Aaron took a step forward. And if I don't, the darkness bent inward, collapsing, becoming teeth, becoming hunger. Then the breach grows, and the earth dies again. The throne cracked. And Aaron woke. Jules was screaming. The ship had begun collapsing in on itself. Walls folding like petals, rooms twisting and compacting. The command chamber was becoming a spiral corridor, pushing them outward toward the hull. "It's ejecting us," Lien shouted. Aaron turned as the floor gave way. They fell through walls, through time, through memory. They woke on the Acheron, soaked, bruised, in a lifeboat, engines dead, drifting. The Orpheus was gone, not sunk, not hidden, vanished. The sea around them was still, the sky above clear. Lien sat up, trembling. It ended the cycle. "No," Aaron said quietly. "It passed it to me." She looked down at her hand. Her palm now bore the sigil, a trident piercing an Ouroboros. Then the emergency beacon crackled to life. Not from the Acheron, from orbit. Sequence confirmed. Interface complete. Earth reset in progress. Aaron stared at the horizon. Something was coming through the clouds. And she knew it was her, or would be. The thing that emerged from the clouds wasn't a vessel. It had no engines, no fuselage, no design that belonged in the lexicon of engineering or aerospace. It shimmered against the sky like a scar in motion, shifting dimensions, its angles collapsing into themselves and reforming in patterns that made Aaron's eyes blur just watching. It was her and not her, like the ship, like the breach, a piece of something ancient that had always been orbiting the edge of their world's awareness, waiting for the right alignment. Aaron stood at the edge of the Acheron's weather-battered bow, staring upward, the beacon's words still fresh in her ears. Sequence confirmed. Interface complete. Earth reset in progress. Lien stood beside her, pale under the morning sun. His hands trembled as he pulled up data from the satellite feed the emergency beacon had somehow hijacked. The readings made no sense. He wasn't reading power or radiation or heat. He was reading mass memory, data that had no physical form but spread across every device on the ship. "It's rewriting things," he whispered. In the background, maps, records, archived history, files that haven't been opened in decades. They're all shifting, like someone is repatching Earth's entire historical framework. Jules had locked himself in the equipment bay 3 hours ago and hadn't spoken since. When Lien tried to coax him out, Jules had shouted through the metal door, saying he remembered a different childhood, a different name, different parents. "Memories like shadows," he said. "They're overlapping, layering." Aaron knew what he meant. She was beginning to feel it too. Her mother's voice, soft and calming, always humming when she made breakfast, was now accompanied by strange phrases in ancient tongues. A lullaby with no melody. Her father's face was clearer than it had ever been, yet entirely unfamiliar, like a dream someone else had shared with her. And her own voice, recordings from her time in grad school, interviews, logs had changed. The accent was gone. Her cadence was smoother, less human. "I think I've already started becoming her," she said aloud. Lien looked at her, eyes raw. "Then how do we stop this?" "I don't know." The Orpheus hadn't vanished. It had ascended, not into orbit, not into space, into position. The shape in the sky was an anchor point. The ship had latched itself across dimensions, like a hook caught in the fabric of Earth's timeline. The cycle wasn't about destruction. It was about rewriting. Aaron walked back inside the Acheron, her boots echoing along the wet steel floors. Her crew, what remained, watched her like a stranger. She couldn't blame them. She felt like one. She descended to the comms room and powered the only thing not corrupted by the signal, the cold black box terminal they use for mission failsafes. An isolated system with no uplinks. Lien joined her after 10 minutes, silent, watching her work. "Final logs?" he asked. "Something like that." She tapped the mic. Static cleared. "This is Dr. Aaron Vale, ID Delta 7. If you're hearing this, then the signal reached you. Maybe you picked it up by accident. Maybe you're like me, someone born to hear it. I can't tell you how long you have. The cycles are not linear. They don't follow time. They are time, but I can tell you this. The ship is real. The breach is real. It was sealed once. It can be sealed again, but the price is identity, memory, self. You don't fight it. You anchor it. You become the seal. And when the time comes, you'll know. She hit send. The black box locked the message, scrambled it into encrypted pulses, and began repeating the signal on loop across shortwave bands. Think anyone will hear it? Lien asked. Aaron exhaled. They already have. He opened his mouth to respond, but then a new noise filled the cabin. A deep, guttural hum, vibrating through the Acheron's hull. Not mechanical, not natural. A resonance, like the Earth itself was being tuned. They rushed to the deck. Above them, the breach shimmered across the clouds. Beneath it, something unfolded. The Orpheus had begun casting its reflection downward, but not as shadow, as matter. Shapes rising from the ocean, impossibly tall. Spiraling towers. Structures that hadn't existed a moment ago. Cities forming from a memory of forgotten civilizations. Not new cities. Old ones. Too old. Lien choked back a sound. It's rebuilding history. Replacing it. The signal continued to broadcast through every device on the ship. Interface complete. Historical overwrite active. Anchoring vessel stabilized. Then came the scream. A digital one, corrupting every speaker, every monitor, sounding like a chorus of voices fused into a single thought. You forgot US. Aaron's knees buckled. The weight of memory, not hers, flooded her thoughts. She was in a temple. She was commanding a fleet. She was dying in orbit. She was burning in the oceans. She was every Aaron who had ever anchored the breach. Lives stacked like strata in her soul. Then silence. Not peace. Just pause. The world felt held. Frozen mid-breath. She stood. Looked around. Lien was gone. The crew gone. The Acheron gone. Only the sea remained, stretching out endlessly in every direction. In her, a voice called out. Not aloud. Not digital. In her head. Anchor accepted. The sky cracked. Something stepped through. Not a god. Not an alien. Not a monster. A silhouette. Human in outline. But hollow. It had her face. She spoke. You're the last. Aaron looked up. What are you? The figure tilted its head. I'm what remains when the seal breaks. I'm the echo. I am the hunger that forgets. You are the memory that binds. But even memories fade. Why now? Aaron asked. Why come back? The figure turned toward the horizon, where strange constellations now blinked in unfamiliar patterns. Because this world forgot we existed, and in forgetting, it gave us permission to return. Aaron stepped closer. Then I'll stop you. You already did. Many times. And each time, the cycle restarts. But you are the last. The sky bent. The stars blinked out. The water around her became mirrors. And she understood. This was the final seal. The ship had passed from its purpose. She was the new lock. She closed her eyes and let go. Somewhere, thousands of feet below, at the bottom of the now-closed Tethys Trench, a small black box continued to broadcast. It repeated Aaron's final message every 4 minutes. It pinged out toward the abyss, into the sonar nets of future explorers, into deep-sea cables, through abandoned satellites, like a message in a bottle thrown into a time-rift ocean, waiting until someone heard it again, until someone found the breach, until someone remembered.